if you're applying to Oxbridge,
Is doing like a load of extracurricular activities really important? So if you want to go and get the most amazing physics degree, so what really goes into predicted grades? Is the deadline for medicine different to the normal Ucas deadline? Which is better, Oxford or Cambridge? So in this video, we're going to be talking about Ucas, and I have a guest here. Who are you?
so my name's Ed. I'm a biology teacher, and I have a role working in the sixth form at my school, and I have a particular focus on helping students prepare for university, with a particular focus, I guess, on medicine and Oxbridge.
Yeah, so when I did Ucas, I don't really remember many of the details. I did it over 20 years ago now, but obviously you're dealing with it at the moment, and we're filming this video in 2023. So there might be changes in the future. So if you're going through the process and things have changed, it's really up to you to kind of find out more information. Firstly, though, Ucas, where can people go to find out a little bit more about it?
Well, simply, I mean, the Ucas website is your first bet.
Yeah.
So the Ucas website is really well organised. They have everything you need to know on every university and every course that they offer, including subject requirements, entry requirements in terms of grades. The sort of elements of an application that you need to particularly consider.
Okay.
Yeah.
So UCAS, firstly. Secondly, I suppose most schools tend to have somebody in the sixth form centre who can support as well.
Yeah. So lots of schools have a kind of a multifaceted approach to this. So we have a head of careers who will talk. Who talk particularly on a website called Unifrog. If your school subscribes to Unifrog and you've not yet come across that, then I would honestly recommend you do, because Unifrog is a phenomenal tool. Maybe we'll talk more about that in a bit. But certainly in terms of what subjects you need, what career options a course could open up for you, I think those are some really great things that the careers advisors can give you. But then there's someone like me who works very closely with the head of sixth form to advise students on possible combinations of subjects, whether they should be doing, even just nitty-gritty things, whether they should be doing further maths to help them with a more mathematical degree.
Yeah.
Whether they should, the pros and cons of looking at 3 or 4 A levels, EPQs, and so on. All of these things are worth a conversation.
And UCAS itself, it's not like you apply to maybe Sheffield University directly.
No.
Everybody applies through UCAS, and then that goes out to the different universities and the course providers.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So you put in one central application through UCAS, and this is for British universities and Northern Ireland. So a typical UCAS application involves obviously a bit of information about you.
Yeah.
So your background, personal information that in principle should have no bearing on whether you get a place, but it's for UCAS's and universities' own data keeping purposes.
Okay.
I think maybe we'll talk a bit more about access later. Am I right?
Yeah. So I suppose as a student in maybe year 12, maybe kind of starting the process, what kind of things should they be thinking about? Maybe before they've even started to apply, what kind of things, or what kind of sort of dates should students sort of be thinking about actually maybe what kind of career they want to do or what university they might be considering going to?
I would say that, some students, of course, already know what they want to do.
Yeah.
They know where they want to go. Of course, you shouldn't be fixed about that. That should be something that's constantly evolving, and that can be determined by your current grades that you're working at, your test and exam scores, etc. But it should be a case of thinking, well, now what am I enjoying the most? Because ultimately you're spending potentially 3+ at least years of your life at an institution, and for me, I personally wouldn't want to be studying something that I really wasn't that interested in just for the sake of coming out the other side with a degree and a huge student debt.
Yeah.
But those sorts of things are really important to start thinking about now. Most of you will probably sit some significant assessments towards the end of your year 12 year. If you're thinking of applying next year and you're in year 13, then you'll already have your A-level results to play with anyway. So your kind of decisions are much easier to make. You're not punting for a place. You're saying, actually, I've qualified. I therefore am likely to get one.
Yeah.
But certainly those are going to guide your choices as well. and it's then thinking about, well, how can I make my application as rounded as possible? How can I sell myself as an individual to make that university want me?
So is doing like a load of extracurricular activities really important, like doing sports, debating club, all those kind of things? Is that important, or
not as important as you would think?
Okay.
Not as important as you'd think, especially if you're thinking of applying to some of the top flight universities.
So if you want to go and get the kind of the most amazing physics degree, they don't really care that much if you've been doing badminton in your spare time.
Not on the slightest.
Okay.
No, I'll be really honest. There's lots of universities are only really interested in that academic experiences section.
Yeah.
And typically we say that at least 80% of your personal statement should be academic.
Okay.
And that should be talking about why you love your subject to such a great extent. Now, of course, not saying that extracurricular activities, so if you're great at sport, if you're really good at drama, you're a good actor, good musician, those things of course are going to help you make a more rounded application, but it's not the most important part of the puzzle.
So
unless, of course, you're applying for one of those degrees.
Yeah,
right?
but it's very much, you've got to get the grades for that course in certain subjects.
Yeah.
And I think we talked earlier about super-curricular activities. So what do you mean by that?
So a super-curricular activity is anything that goes above and beyond the curriculum that you're studying.
Okay.
So that's beyond the realms of the A-level specification. And ideally, it should be things, as I say, that you're really interested in. So at our school, we provide a huge number of suggestions, subject by subject, for the students to dip into. And of course, we're always available to chat to about the sorts of books, the sorts of podcasts, films, YouTube videos.
Yeah,
of course, YouTube videos.
Yeah.
That might be really good to help enrich and to help infuse.
And I guess some of those are going to come from the school, maybe where you've got like a school trip to, maybe you're going to CERN, for example, or you're going to the Diamond Light Source, and that's provided by the school. But students can surely do stuff themselves if there's online masterclasses through universities, and I think some of these, it's not necessarily down to your teachers to say you need to be doing this, but there are opportunities that students can find out about themselves and just go, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's about going the extra mile. Don't sit there and wait to be told what to do. If you're interested in the subject, then seek out what those opportunities are. There's even things like FutureLearn. FutureLearn is a fantastic platform that is free for the majority of you guys in the way you'll want to use it.
And that's like online courses.
Online courses week by week. Just to give you a bit of an insight into a field. Particularly like something like engineering, which we don't study specifically at school. Do a MOOC course, do a FutureLearn course, and that'll give you plenty of ideas as to whether it's something you might actually want to pursue.
And I suppose that's going to really help your application, rather than just saying, I did the A-level in physics and I did well, but there's a little bit more to them that I suppose shows universities that they want to study in their own time, they've got that motivation and interest and passion in that subject.
Absolutely, and actually ultimately it's that set of predictions or that set of A-level results that you apply with, that only gets you on the starting line.
Okay, so in terms of how that works then, so students are going to, when they're doing A-levels, they'll have had their GCSE results, which are real exams, and they've got their real grades. Obviously, they're not going to know their real A-level grades till the end of year 13 in the summer, by which time they've already applied. So what really goes into informing a teacher about predicted grades? I suppose as a biology teacher yourself, what are you going to be looking at with your students? We're
looking for consistent evidence that the student is capable of performing to that particular level.
Yeah.
So, if a student consistently presents me with evidence that they have the ability to work at an A-star, then I would have no choice but to say, I think you're likely to get an A-star.
Yeah.
Just because they had one dud test result, that's not the be all and end all. It's about being aspirational. So we're saying actually this is the best possible outcome for you if you work to your capacity. Certainly it's about accumulating a bank of evidence that schools can use to formulate those grades.
And I think sometimes as a teacher it's quite hard when students have been performing maybe not at their best, maybe all the way through year 12, they're getting E's and U's and stuff, and they say, well, I'm going to work harder next year, I promise I'll get an A. It must be harder then for the teachers to evidence they're going to get that kind of grade that you're predicting.
And so actually working really hard through year 12 is so important, and it's not just to get good predicted grades, it's to enrich your academic profile. So these two things really must go hand in hand.
So grades are quite important, but ultimately if you're applying for a course where they need 3 A's, the assumption is that everybody else going for that course will also have 3As.
Exactly.
And that means you need to do something to kind of show you've got something a bit different to them.
Absolutely.
So personal statements, I've heard a lot about those. I've heard that even people are using things like ChatGPT to start writing them and maybe kind of get their drafts together. What's the deal with the personal statement? What's that for, and are things changing in the future?
Yeah, so the personal statement is a way of selling yourself, and the idea, and it might sound obvious, but it's a personal statement. So it's, why do you want to study that subject at university? And some universities will value that much more highly than others. Particularly, I said the top flight universities, because that's the place where a student can really stand out from the crowd.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's as I mentioned before, it's at least 80% academic. So it's trying to convince that institution that you are the right person for them, that you love self-motivated study, that you love learning in depth about your subject from first principles, that you are the person that they want to have these small group seminars with, or tutorials with, and people that are going to maybe go on and do further research in that field. Do a master's, do a PhD, do an MPhil is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
Okay, so when all of that's kind of said and done, there's the application side of things, but when students are thinking about university, it's going to be very different to school. There's a completely different structure to the way that learning is carried out at different institutions. How would a student maybe start to find out more about that? I know there's open days often in the summer of year 12. How do students actually get onto those and find out about those?
For university open days?
Yeah.
They just, websites like UniFrog are brilliant for that.
Yeah.
Ucas is brilliant. But just, if you're interested in particular institutions, just go onto their websites. These websites are better than they ever have been before. They get updated regularly. There are people employed to update the websites. They have social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, probably TikTok, where they're trying to put out the most relevant information for this grouub of students.
And I suppose they're trying to sell themselves because they want the best students to come to their university to help them in the future.
Yeah, and and they obviously want the best people academically, but they also want people who are going to help them to come top of the league and in the Bucks rugby league, and it's these things they have quite sophisticated ways of picking out the best people for them.
Yeah. But ultimately, say for example, you were thinking about doing maybe a physics degree and you wanted to go to Sheffield University, you probably want to go to the Sheffield University website, look at what they're doing in physics. There might be a prospectus you can download.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that kind of shows that you're willing, as opposed to just going, rather than just waiting for somebody to tell you stuff, you have to go and be proactive and start looking into different courses.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I suppose, to realise that even if you do that course at that university, that's not going to be what you're doing for the rest of your life. So you might go to one university, then go to a different university to do a master's, or you might change career or change course halfway through. And actually, I think what I found, this was again a long time ago, but when I did mechanical engineering and everybody did the same lectures in that first year, and then in the second, third and fourth year, you could choose and specialise in whichever area you wanted to go to. So by my fourth year, I was doing lots of stuff with the aeronautical students. And then I was doing some other things with the maths department and with people doing physics. So you can kind of adjust and kind of tailor your degree when you're actually at university. So
Absolutely.
It's not completely fixed in stone what you're going to be doing.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of, there's optional modules. For example, when I did a natural sciences degree, so that was mainly pharmacology, biology, bit of chemistry, bit of maths.
Yeah.
But I also did an evening class in French. So there's lots of other things you can do that are outside of your subject that you've actually applied for.
Yeah. So that's most university, but I think medicine is a bit different if you're thinking about going down the medical route.
Yeah. So medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, veterinary medicine. They all follow a fairly similar pattern. So you apply in the same way, but you can only apply to 4 institutions rather than 5. Your 5th one can be for a different course. So you can only apply to 4 schools for that particular subject. There's a real premium based on work experience and volunteering for these degrees because, of course, they're more vocational. And it's hugely important for you to be able to show an institution that you're applying for that you have taken the time to go and visit care homes, to visit animal shelters, to go and visit dental practices, to do online courses, to get as much work experience as you can.
And I suppose they're quite vocational. So it's not like if you're a dentist, you're going to be just studying dentistry. You're going to be actually working with patients. And
that's the key. It's can you work with people? And quite often someone will say, actually, I really want to study medicine, and you've got to really take the time to think, actually, is this really what I want to do? Do I like day in, day out talking to different people?
Do you want to actually be a doctor?
Do I want to actually be a doctor? Do I understand what the career entails? Because there's a really quite specific set of skills involved in those three. And it takes some going to, even once you've applied, to actually get into one of these schools, because there's multiple layers of testing and interviewing, and it's an arduous process.
But I suppose as well, even with that maybe example, if you did a physics degree, I'm not just trying to sell physics degrees, but if you did a physics degree, you might specialise in medical physics, and then you might spend your career working on MRI machines, looking at scanning technology. So you might still end up working in medicine and being in a hospital, but you wouldn't necessarily have gone down the becoming a doctor.
And within those, as you say, there are so many different other opportunities that they're not medicine, they're not dentistry, they're not vet, but they're technicians, say in the X-ray department. They're nurses, they're dental hygienists. These are all hugely valued components of multidisciplinary teams in these professions, and they need to work together, and we need a big team of people to make these places work and to make people's quality of life better.
And is the deadline for medicine different to the normal Ucas deadline?
Yeah, so medicine, dentistry, vet school plus Oxbridge are all middle of October, so they're usually the 15th of October. So it's a much earlier deadline, whereas for everything else you have until, in recent times, I think this year was kind of the 20-something of January, which is a bit later than normal. I think the pandemic kind of pushed things back a bit.
But obviously, if you're watching this now, make sure you know the deadline for this year, not just relying on what we said there. But
absolutely.
So normal UCAS is about January time in year 13.
But really, it's beneficial to get it in way before, because then you can actually focus on your A levels and making sure that you get those grades that you're applying with, essentially. Yeah.
And so you mentioned Oxbridge, so that's Oxford and Cambridge.
Yeah.
Now they're slightly different, aren't they? I know that they're kind of world renowned, they're world famous. Can you tell me a bit more about Oxbridge and what that entails?
So really, I mean, if you're applying to Oxbridge, and I'm gonna broaden that, and I'm gonna broaden that to Imperial, to LSE, to St Andrews. These other these other institutions really have shown, particularly if you look at the league tables, that they are right up there as well. And they're as hard to get into as Oxbridge. The way they stand themselves apart is because they usually have that extra layer of application, which is essentially an interview. And that St Andrews doesn't interview, but they will have an extra layer of kind of filtering in order to make sure they get the best applicants, because it's a small university. But in terms of your personal statement, it's even more important that you meet that kind of 80, 85, maybe even 90% academic content, because again, that's the thing that's going to make you stand out as someone who is, keen to potentially be a front runner in that field in the future. That's what they're after. But you also have to be able to thrive in that really small group setting. Quite often at places like Oxbridge, you'll be having 1-on-1, 2-on, maybe 3-on-1 tutorials where it's just you sitting in a room for 2 or 3 hours with someone who is a world-leading expert in that field, having a conversation, and this is a conversation that you'll have had to prepare significantly for, and you need to show what you're made of.
So that's pretty intense. So really intense, for some people, they might have the academic skills, but not necessarily, they might not thrive in that environment.
No, and actually, I think you don't have to be the most extrovert person in the world to thrive in that environment, because it's a small group environment. But so actually, it might suit you better. But it's how interested are you in your subject that you would want to talk for that length of time about something quite specific? I mean, I would hope super excited about it, and really into it. Some of the students from our school that have gone into Oxford over the last few years, they are those people. They are the people that are just going to absolutely come alive in those situations.
And I think it's worth considering, isn't it, as opposed to thinking, well, that's not for me, I'm never going to get in. I think it's definitely worth, if you're even thinking about it, to really do your research and look into the system. And they've got different colleges, is that right?
Yes, there's a college system. So you generally apply to a specific college. They also have a pooling system where if you're not quite successful at the one you've applied for, then other colleges can fish you out of the pool.
Oh, okay.
So that's another opportunity to get in. Universities like Durham have a collegiate system as well, where you apply to a college. The colleges ultimately are where you're based. That's where you spend a lot of time with those people in those colleges. The academic tuition you get is it's fairly similar across the different colleges. So it's not that one college is better than another.
Yeah.
But if you're going to apply to somewhere like Oxbridge, it's really important you do your research, because if you're thinking of a tactical application, it might be that actually one college has 12 places for your degree, but one only has 2. So actually, you'd have to be pretty confident in yourself that you were one of the 2 best people in the country applying to that college to get into that college. Whereas, if you're playing the odds a little bit, maybe apply for the one that has a slightly bigger intake.
Yeah. But equally, it's not impossible, because there's going to be hundreds or thousands of people going to Oxford
Absolutely.
and Cambridge every year.
Yeah.
And you could be one of those people. There's no reason why at the moment, if you've got the academic side of things covered, then you can't kind of go down that route. Which is better, Oxford or Cambridge?
That's a very difficult question. I applied to Cambridge, I was unsuccessful. So I think on that basis, I'm going to say Oxford.
Okay. I never applied, actually, partly because when I was younger, I lived up in the northeast. So I was up in Northumberland. And for me, it felt like quite a long way to go. Yeah. And in the end, I went to Sheffield, where I really enjoyed it. And my second choice was actually Durham.
Okay.
So that would have been more the kind of collegiate system. Yeah. But that was my second choice. And I really loved Sheffield as a city, in terms of like the structure of the course worked really well for me. Yeah. And I think if I'd maybe gone to Oxford or Cambridge, I don't know if I'd have got in, but I got quite a few A's and stuff. So I did pretty well academically. But I don't know if I'd have enjoyed that system, whereas I quite liked the fact that most afternoons at Sheffield I had the afternoon off to go and ride my bike. So that worked for me, and I don't think that's really held me back in my career since then.
I agree, and I went to Bath. I went to Bath and did natural sciences, and I was really happy because I did a lot of swimming as well, and that was something I was able to continue at Bath because of their sort of sporting reputation. So it meant that I had the ability to step away from the library and sort of go and swim for 2 hours twice a day, 7 days a week. So
but it really depends what you want, isn't it? And I think you can be really successful no matter which university you go to, as long as you're willing to put the work in, and by the time you finish university, you're often only 21, 22, and actually it's really then down to you to kind of use your other skills to actually to find a job that you love to kind of make your own career. So university is part of that, but it's not for everybody, and there's loads of ways. And I think some people go to university after a year out or even later than that, don't they?
Well, and I think particularly since COVID and post pandemic, I think it's become even more important for young people to have maybe a bit of time out of that learning environment where they can just enjoy themselves a little bit more and explore the world a bit, because what COVID certainly taught us was that we really miss not being able to explore the world and do things that we were used to doing. And actually, I think for all of us, we put a real premium on that. So if you don't feel like you're quite ready to go, then that's fine. Get the grades, get the best A-level grades you possibly can do, and then think about applying. And there's no reason to say that university is even the right route. It could be that you go down a more vocational route or an apprenticeship route. Yeah,
I must say, one of the people who works for me now, he got accepted at Oxford, but he now works for me, and he didn't finish university because he decided to get into his own business, and he works for me and does other multimedia stuff. Yeah. And it's not that he's not got the ability, it's just he decided that he'd rather go into the world of work and actually... He's going to be editing this video. So he's the person editing this video. He decided not to go down that route. Somebody else who works for me part-time, he's got a physics degree and he works for me. And it's like there's different ways to get to wherever you want to be in life.
Absolutely.
Maybe one of something I haven't really touched on is people who maybe want to go and study abroad.
Okay.
That's not Ucas, is it? Is that a completely separate system?
It's completely separate, and it's very country specific. So it's definitely worth doing your research. Okay. But it's certainly a case of if you had a particular institution in mind, they would be able to advise you on exactly what you needed to do.
So say for example, you want to go to America and study there, and you wanted to go to MIT or Stanford or something like that. Probably the best thing is to, I suppose, do your own research, go to their websites, and then that will guide you about the process.
And American institutions generally need. Obviously, you'll need to get your A-level results, but you'll need to also do exams called SATs. You might need to do AP exams as well, in a variety of different subjects to show that you are, again, very well-rounded. we actually have a student who is from Hong Kong, and she is about to go over to the States to sit her AP exams to try and then launch a full assault on a really strong application next, so for 2024 entry. After she's got all of these results in. But it's a very different system, and it's certainly worth doing your research. It's also very expensive going to America if you don't have a scholarship and you are a UK or an international student. So again, it's definitely something to bear in mind. If I weren't to get a scholarship, how would I fund this? Because there's no such thing as a student loan like we would have in the UK.
Talking of which, student loans, that is something that students have to think about, isn't it? About the finances. And obviously, it's going to be very expensive going to America. For students in the UK, how does it work, or what's just very briefly? Because again, things might change and stuff, and I think it depends on the students' individual circumstances.
It does, and it's all governed through Student Finance England. And
that's separate to Ucas.
Separate to Ucas, it's a government-run organisation, and they open approximately now, so it's certainly something to keep an eye on. So Student Finance England, and essentially you fill out an application, you tell them about your family circumstances. It may be that you're eligible for some sort of bursary, and that could be because of parental occupation. It could be because of disability. There's various things that could entitle you to getting a bursary.
And that's very much they give you the money,
and you don't have to pay it back. But most people will apply for what we call a maintenance loan, and that maintenance loan generally is used to cover your living costs, so food, accommodation, those sorts of things. And some people then obviously use the student loan to pay for their tuition as well, which you'll pay back very gradually, and you'll pay back more and more depending on your income.
So I think that's one thing where if, for example, your total student loan was £50,000, you wouldn't necessarily have to pay it all back, because it really depends on afterwards. For example, if you're earning lots of money, then you're going to be paying it back a lot quicker. If you aren't above a certain threshold, and again, it's going to change year by year, but if, for example, you didn't get a job where you were earning above a certain amount, you wouldn't actually be paying much of that loan back a year at all, or even, and some people might never pay it back.
No, I mean, when I got my first teaching job, I was paying something like £13 a month back of my £60,000 student loan. So that doesn't sound like a huge amount. I'm paying more of it now because I earn more money, but it's still, again, it's not. It doesn't really make a dent in what is quite a sizable loan.
So far we've talked about university, which is kind of I think it's not the standard for everybody, but it's like that's the traditional way of doing things. What about apprenticeships and that side of things? How does that work? How does a student maybe think, I don't want to go to university, but I want to get an apprenticeship instead? What do they do?
So apprenticeships you don't tend to apply through Ucas, although Ucas has a great deal of information about apprenticeships, which is really useful. I've mentioned Unifrog already. Unifrog also has a huge amount of information about apprenticeships. And you can tailor your searches so that you get alerts when applications open for particular institutions. But certainly there's, most apprenticeships out there are called degree apprenticeships. A degree apprenticeship is where you work for a company, they train you up on the job, and you become a qualified part of their company, but you also come out with a degree at the end of it. And you get paid. So you get paid by the company. There is no student loan that you have to pay off at the end. So it's a real win-win situation. Now, obviously, apprenticeships, again, means that you go straight into the world of work, so you don't necessarily get that opportunity to find yourself, maybe, which is what people go to university for.
So less parties, potentially.
Yeah, fewer parties, although, it's not to say that you won't be with a wild apprenticeship crew at your firm, but, that's probably a disadvantage, because you miss out on that kind of university lifestyle, which people hold really importantly to them. It's where people make a lot of their closest friends. So...
But on the other hand, you could be, after a few years, you'd be qualified, you wouldn't have any student debt at all.
And also a guaranteed job most of the time.
And I think actually that's quite important, because some people might have the best degree, but they don't have the skills to actually apply that knowledge in the workplace. So if you did, maybe I think you can probably do accountancy and things like that through KPMG, or you can go to an engineering company and work with Rolls-Royce. When you've got that degree, you've also not got the student debt, and you've got the skills that kind of allow you to know where that's going to help you in the workplace in the future, really.
Exactly, and there's there are, and also we have to remember that it's not just the huge organisations that run apprenticeship programs. There's also lots of little startups that really value that kind of enthusiasm from a graduate. A graduate straight out of school, who was really passionate about that field. I think particularly in environmental matters, thinking about combating climate change, and sustainability. If you're passionate about that, and I know a lot of our students are, do a bit of research. There's lots of these startups who are looking for people to train with them, and they will train you up in return.
Oh, cool. And I think ultimately, to some extent, now I'm an adult and I'm looking back on it, I felt there was a rush to go from sixth form straight into university, and I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time where I went. I think I was very lucky with the kind of course that I chose.
Yeah.
But equally, I know other people, and I've got good friends who went to university in their 20s when they actually had a good idea about what they wanted to do. And then since then, they've changed career several times. I've changed my job, and I think I've learnt a lot of really good life skills outside of university. So it's not the only solution. I think it's a good solution for many, many people, but I think it really depends on you and your circumstances and what you want to gain out of it. I also know some people who went to university for completely the wrong reasons, and they felt like pressured to do it.
Yeah.
They got to university, they failed their first year, changed course, failed their second year, and they ended up on a course that didn't really suit what they were interested in, and then they found it really difficult to complete it.
I would say don't just apply for university because you think you have to. I think that's really important.
And your parents say you have to.
Of course, and it's your school says you have to because you don't, and ultimately if you don't feel like you're going to come away with something that is really meaningful to you and it's not a subject that you're really passionate about, then it means that you're not going to make the most of your future career. And employers will see that. It's quite visible to see who's passionate about what they do. And again, it's a thing that sets people apart. So, make sure it's the right decision. Make sure that, if it's not university, have a look at the apprenticeships route. But if it's neither of those two things, then there are plenty of other options out there as well.
Absolutely. So in terms of finding out more information, maybe there's somebody in year 12 watching this. Where could they go to find out a bit more? Who could they ask?
So certainly ask your teachers, ask your careers advisors, ask your heads of sixth form, ask your, some schools have people in specific positions to discuss apprenticeships and university applications. But otherwise, do some research yourself, look at Ucas, look at UniFrog. If you're interested in apprenticeships as well, both of those are still applicable, but also, look into specific firms. There are specific, as I say, there are people dedicated out there to help you find these, find the right path for you. You've just got to use them.
Yeah, and what I'll do, I'll put some links beneath this video to some of the sites that are really useful for you to have a look at. And of course, you can just do your own research. If you know there's one particular place you'd like to go to university, you can go to the website, you can find out more about the course and the structure, and there's often people at university I'm sure you can contact as well who might help with that.
Absolutely, there's whole departments who are looking at schools outreach, and they want to obviously try and get help you come to their university, but ultimately they want to give you an insight into what it's going to be like.
Cool. Well, Ed, thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully, watching this, you got something out of that. I learnt a lot, actually. I want to go back to university myself. It sounds good.
I don't, but
okay. I'm going to learn more stuff. Anyway, Ed, thank you so much for today. Thank you.
Okay.